Welcome to Kale University's kitchen. My name is Ken Dorr, and I'm going to be preparing a zucchini bread for you today. This is a pretty large zucchini, but we've been getting them a little bit less than this, but they've been growing at a very high rate. Probably we've been getting 4 or 5 of them a week. And so we've been finding all different uses for the summer zucchini. Including some soups, zucchini tater tots, things like that, and we'll make some other videos of some other uses of zucchini. So if you're growing zucchini, you know what I mean. They can really grow fast. So the zucchini bread, we're going to be making some 5 by 9 inch loaves. So we have pans here that we've taken a little bit of coconut oil and greased them up. And then we've also got some mini loaves. So we'll be making these mini loaves as well. And so I'm going to go through the recipe here, and we'll also post the recipe so that you can make it at home. Now there is to sweeten it. I've modified the recipe. You can find zucchini bread recipes online, all different kinds of banana bread recipes, zucchini recipes. I've combined some banana and zucchini together. And I've modified it to also make it a low glycemic, but a sweeter, not too sweet, bread. Now, normally it would call for sugar, or it might call for agave, or that kind of thing, a little higher glycemic. So I've been using 0 glycemic monk fruit. Now, you could also use a little bit of stevia. We're talking about green leaf stevia, as well as monk fruit to help sweeten it up. Now I'm also using some applesauce, unsweetened applesauce. That also helps keep it moist. And we're also going to use some walnuts. We have some chopped walnuts here that we'll be putting in. And then a number of spices. So we have some allspice, some cinnamon, a little pinch of salt in it. And I'm also going to add some walnuts to it as well. And really you can modify these recipes to be your own. Now we don't want to have any gluten in here, so I'm not using, our family is gluten-free. So we're using a coconut flour, and coconut flour is gluten-free, as well as a quinoa flour. So I've got some flour that I've got mixed in here, a little bit of psyllium husk also. It kind of keeps it a little bit moist as well. So basically what we're going to do is grate the zucchini, and one of the best ways to grate it is with the fine grate on this side as opposed to the larger holes here. You could also chop up your zucchini and make it a little bit smaller and put it into a food processor, like with an S-blade, or if you have a setting or like a fine setting on it, also to shred it, you could do that as well. But even the S-blade, just pulsing it, can pulse it into a little more of a mash. So just taking it, even if you're just going to grate it, this is one of the easiest ways. I kind of like to do some things by hand, so that's what I'm doing here. And I'm going to make quite a few loaves. So I've got 4 loaves of the 5 by 9 and then 4 of the mini loaves that I'm going to make. But I'm going to make 1 loaf at a time, so I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. I've already grated up some of the zucchini, so I've got 1.5 cups of the zucchini here. You'll see in the recipe that it'll call for 1 cup of zucchini, but I'm adding a little bit more. Since we have so much zucchini to use, I'm going to add a little bit more to the recipe. Also, we're going to use some very ripe bananas. Now, if you take a look at these are for the next loaf I'm going to do, but I've already got some taken out of there. Now, they're very dark. That's really, the bananas can be, you want them definitely to have the dark spots on them, because you don't want to take unripe bananas and use those. You want them to be very ripe. And inside here, they're actually beautiful. They're not all black or anything inside, but you want them to be nice and sweet. Okay, and very ripe. They're very nutritious that way. So I've got this bowl, and I put the bananas into here. They're ready to mash. And you can get like a potato masher or an avocado masher. Also works really well. And you're just going to mash up the banana to start. Okay, so I don't know if you can see in here, but I've got the banana getting mashed. And you want to try to get it as mashed up as you can. Get a nice moist paste, basically, from the banana. Now, as you stir in the other ingredients, it's going to mash even a little bit more, but you want to start with one that's, pretty mashed up. So I've got 2 very ripe bananas in here. And I've got it pretty well mashed up here. You can see that. Sorry for the noise there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in our zucchini. So I've got, you'll see that there's, if you can see this, the liquid coming off of this, don't strain that off. You'll find recipes online that they'll say, oh, strain off the liquid from the zucchini. That actually adds to the moisture. So if you see a recipe with that, just go ahead and keep all that beautiful juice and nutritious juice already in there. So I'm going to stir that in, mix it up. We've got our base here started. And then you'll see that I'm also, this recipe that I modified asked for canola oil. Canola oil, if you do your research, you'll see that canola oil is not going to be your friend. That's not going to be good for you overall. In fact, if you research it, you'll see that it was never really intended for human consumption. And it comes from the rapeseed, and that's something that we want to, at least in my family, we'll want to avoid. Also, you don't want to use olive oil if you see recipes that call for olive oil, because this is a vegan but cooked recipe. This is not a raw recipe, and so even though we're using all organic ingredients, we will be putting it into the oven, and we'll be putting it into the oven at 350 degrees. Now, if you were to use an oil such as olive oil and some other oils too that don't take a high heat, they actually can turn, olive oil can turn toxic over 300 degrees. So that's something also you should keep in mind. Don't use olive oil and don't bake in the oven things with olive oil over 300 degrees, because that can be very detrimental to your health. So we're using coconut oil. Coconut oil can take a very high heat, and so we have some coconut oil here. This calls for a quarter of a cup, and so I'm going to just pull this out, put it in. We're just going to mix this in as well. Also, I mentioned that we greased our pan with some coconut oil. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Hold on just a second. Let me grab this one piece of equipment here. If you're not familiar with this, this is called a jar spatula. Jar spatulas, you can see it's very tall, the silicone part here, and it really bends. It's made for really kind of cleaning out jars. And so it's also good for cleaning out if you've got a container and you really want to kind of clean that out. It's good for getting down in there. Or if you've got, let's say, a Vitamix or a blender that you're trying to get underneath the blades of the blender, like you're making a pesto or something like that, and you really want to get it all out, try a jar spatula, because it can actually get underneath the blades and it can really get a lot of that delicious food out that might normally go to waste. Okay. Oh, sorry. So we're going to mix in the oil here. Okay. And we're going to continue to mix in other ingredients. So again, I'm going to post all the ingredients, but now we've got some applesauce, and we're going to add that in and just slide this over a little bit. So we've got the applesauce. This is a quarter cup of the applesauce in there. Again, it keeps a lot of the moisture in there. Okay, and let me see here. Just set this aside. Okay. So we've got our applesauce. Now we're going to add some of the flavorings, some of the powders that we have in this recipe. We've got, I mentioned that we're going to add some cinnamon and some allspice and a little pinch of some salt. You want to make sure it's a good salt. You can certainly leave that out if you want, especially if you're going to modify this recipe, if you're avoiding salt. And like I said, we're also going to put in 0 glycemic sweeteners instead of sugar and that kind of thing. So keep those in mind. You don't have to add the salt in here. There's a little bit also of some baking soda. Some baking soda kind of helps it rise a little bit. Very good when you're baking to add a little bit of that in there. And it's also a nice it's nice to help balance your pH also. Baking soda can be very, very good. Sodium bicarbonate. Okay, just make sure that you get a good baking soda if you're using one without aluminum in it. Now, most reputable health food stores are going to have baking soda without aluminum in them. Okay. All right, so now I've got that mixed up here. And we're going to add now the flour. So this is a mix of quinoa flour, coconut flour, and some psyllium husk. So I'm going to add some of that in, a little bit at a time. You can sift it ahead of time if you want to make sure that you don't have any lumps in it, but also if you really get in here and get aggressive and work it. What we're looking for now is like a consistency. We're not there yet. You can see it's very moist, but we're looking for this being, a nice thick dough like you would normally in baking. So we'll just keep turning this in, mixing it up. Okay, now it's starting to really thicken up now. Okay, a little bit more here. Just add the rest of it in here. And some people like to use a fork or other tools. That's fine. Everything will work. Okay, now we're getting ourselves into a nice thick dough, something that we can put into the pan and bake. But we're going to add a few more things to this. Now, this is up to you. You have the option to maybe add some raisins. So I've got some walnuts here as well. So I'm going to add some walnuts in. And I also have some, actually this one I decided to do some cranberries. So these are some sweetened with a little bit of apple juice cranberries. And you can add those in with the walnuts. I've done a cup, so it's a half a cup of each in there. And now I'm going to start turning that in here as well. The walnuts add a nice taste to it. The cranberries, since they have a little bit of tartness to them, is very nice as well. You can certainly add raisins if you want to. Okay. Looks good enough to eat. Okay, now there was one other ingredient here that I wanted to add, and that is also the vanilla extract. So we have some vanilla extract, organic vanilla extract, and it calls for 2 teaspoons. So we've got our measure here. We're just going to put 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. Now, I'm going to probably experiment a little bit because I have a natural flavoring of butterscotch, and so that, which is alcohol free, and that is a possibility as well. So if you wanted to have just a little taste of butterscotch, that could be something that you could do. But make sure that you get, like, with any of these flavorings, that you're using organic. Do your research, find some flavorings, or make your own kind of flavorings as well. So now we've got the vanilla in here. It smells delicious. And this last is the zero glycemic sweetener. This is monk fruit. Now, the recipe originally that I had called for some sugar, and it called for 3/4 of a cup of sugar. And so I cut that down. I actually just put in a half a cup of zero glycemic sweetener. The monk fruit, which is zero glycemic, is equal in quantity to sugar. So if it calls for a teaspoon of sugar, it's equal 1 teaspoon of monk fruit. And it has no aftertaste like some sweeteners do that are zero glycemic. And so that can be a very good one to bake with. You can add less than that too, because to be honest with you, the zucchini has a nice sweetness to it. the applesauce. You could even add a little bit more of the applesauce if you wanted to, that kind of thing. But we are using the monk fruit as a zero glycemic. So that way, anyone that had issues with diabetes, or they were looking at their blood sugar rising too high, especially when you're using sugar, or you have kids that you're trying to wean off of too much sugar, then the zero glycemic would work very, very well. Okay. So I think we pretty much... Now, another option could be some unsweetened carob chips. These are carob chips that could be sprinkled in as well. I'm not going to put those into this one. And keep this one just really with the cranberry and the walnuts in here as the additive. So now I've really got it mixed up here. And I think I'm ready to put it into a pan. So we're going to start here with a 5 by 9 inch. If you do have a pan that's a little bit smaller than this, or bigger, especially if it's taller, what you might need to do is when you put it in the oven, we'll be setting the oven at 350 degrees, and if when you go to take it out, usually about 55 minutes is the time you want it to be in the oven, then you can put a knife into it, and if it comes out and it's not quite done yet, then I would drop the temperature from 350 to 325 and just go for like another 8 to 10 minutes or so and just check it then, okay? So all we're going to do, I told you we have this lightly greased here with coconut oil, and we're just going to pad this in. It makes a really wonderful snack, a wonderful dessert. We often will take some with us if we're going out to a show or something like that. You know, sort of the hidden in our man purse when we go into the theater. And here we go. We've pretty much got it all in here. Now this will rise up. Looks wonderful, smells wonderful, and I know by experience that this tastes wonderful. It's one of our favorite breads to make. And there we are. We have one loaf successfully done. Like I said, we're going to make 4 of these same size, and then we're going to make the mini loaves as well. So we'll be posting, and you can look for that, the modified recipe here for the Zucchini-Banana Bread. And like I said, you want to be able to put it in the oven 350 for 55 minutes, and then an additional, up to 10 minutes if you needed to, if it wasn't quite done when you check it. Okay? And we just finished showing you how to make this wonderful zucchini bread. If you can see this is one of the loaves that we have here. And we made 4 of these 5 by 9 pan loaves. And then we also made a wonderful little 4 mini loaves right here. And I can tell already from the smell of them that it's going to be delicious. And I hope that this was informative for you, and happy vegan cooking. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to Kale University. So you can subscribe below the video here, and we hope to see you next time. Thanks.